Her daughter-in-law slapped her across the face, in her own kitchen. Ruth Hayward, 71, didn't flinch. Tanya sneered, called her a burden, and said, "You're lucky we let you stay here." By the end of the month, Tanya would be the one packing boxes under court order. The deed never left Ruth's name, neither did her dignity, and when they tried to fight it, the judge only needed to hear the recordings. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. I stood still in the kitchen, my hands damp from rinsing out the sponge, lemon-scented suds sliding slowly down my fingers. The morning had been quiet, not the kind that invites calm, but the kind that trembles under the weight of everything unspoken. Tanya stood by the fridge, arms crossed, tapping a manicured nail against the handle like it owed her something. "I said no more oat milk, Ruth," she snapped. "How hard is that to remember?" I didn't flinch. I blinked once, slowly, and placed the sponge back in its holder by the sink. My back straightened. "I used what was already open," I said, voice even. She rolled her eyes and slammed the fridge shut. "You never listen. You just do what you want, like this is still your house." I turned slightly, drying my hands on the dish towel. I didn't realize using what's left was a crime. And that's when it happened. A sharp, open-handed slap across my left cheek. The sound didn't echo. It didn't need to. It was too precise for that. Too personal, deliberate. I didn't move. For a half second, I just stood there, the heat blooming slowly under my skin as my body caught up with what had happened. "You're lucky," she muttered, her tone almost clinical. "We let you stay here." We. As if my son had signed off on the sentence right beside her. I turned, not to meet her eyes, but toward the hallway. Eli stood there, half in the kitchen, one sock on, car keys dangling from his hand. His mouth hung open slightly. He'd seen it. He didn't move. The only sound was the ticking of the clock above the stove, one beat, then another. "Tanya," he started. She shot him a look. I watched it land, not violent, just familiar. The kind of look he obeyed not because it scared him, but because he was used to it. "Just go to work," she said. "Please." Eli looked at me. His mother. The woman who taught him how to tie his shoes, who stitched together his costumes for every Halloween, even the year he changed his mind last minute and begged to be a pirate instead of a ninja. The woman who sat beside his bed through pneumonia when he was 11, when Tanya left for a career-critical dinner. He turned and walked out the door. The screen creaked, slammed shut. I didn't touch my face, didn't say a word. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, walked past Tanya without meeting her eyes, and headed down the hallway to what used to be the master bedroom, now reduced to Grandma's corner, as it was labeled in glittery marker on the family calendar taped to the fridge. The air was cooler in there, quieter. I closed the door gently, locked it, and sat down on the edge of the bed. Then I reached down and opened the bottom drawer of my cedar chest. Beneath a stack of dish towels and a quilt I hadn't used since Walter passed, I pulled out the document protector, its plastic slightly yellowed at the edges. I slid it out carefully, like it was a fragile memory I hadn't dared revisit. Inside was the deed. A gift, technically, one I'd made 10 years ago when Eli and Tanya couldn't qualify for a mortgage. I'd transferred the house to them, but my late husband, God bless his foresight, insisted on one clause, rights reserved. The legal phrasing was dry, but the meaning was alive. I still held 51% of the home. I still had say. I still had power. For years I hadn't thought about it, hadn't wanted to. Now I reached for my flip phone, the same one they liked to joke about behind my back. I dialed from memory. Carmen answered on the second ring. "Ruth? Everything okay?" I glanced at the purple shadow already blooming beneath my cheekbone in the dresser mirror. My voice was steady. "Is my name?" I asked. "Still primary on file?" They redecorated my home with insults and silence, not suddenly, not with a bang or a house-wide renovation, but with small, creeping replacements, just enough to make you wonder if you were imagining things, just enough to make you question what had always been yours. It started with the wall by the hallway, once home to 3 framed black and white photos, Me and Walter on our wedding day, Eli's second-grade class picture, and a faded image of the old library where I worked for 28 years. Gone. In their place now, Tanya's vision board, scotch-taped and smug, magazine clippings of sleek modern kitchens, a meditation corner mood board, and a bold-cut headline clipped from some lifestyle site that read, "Manifest the home you deserve." I stood there one morning with my tea, staring at the line under a photo of a minimalist yoga studio that read, "No dead energy allowed." I guess I was the dead energy. They'd made a habit of hosting dinners lately, potlucks, wine nights, grown-up charcuterie evenings, Tanya called them. I was always welcome to cook, never invited to stay. "Your casserole is the best," Tanya chirped once, pulling the dish from my hands like a trophy. "But it's mostly Eli's work friends. You know how the vibe is." I knew the vibe. It was exclusion, wrapped in fake brightness and thrown like a party favor. In the quiet of my room, no longer the master, no longer even mine by appearance, I sat with the deed again. The wording hadn't changed, neither had the percentages. Ruth Hayward retained 51% ownership, full access, full occupancy, but the master suite had gone to them years ago under the pretense of needing space for the baby. There was never a baby, just ideas, plans, and then complaints. Always complaints. Now I shared a hallway with the laundry room and the utility closet. The heat vent rattled all winter. They called it Grandma's Corner and printed it on the family calendar in bubble letters. That calendar hung by the fridge. The same fridge where my shopping requests had started disappearing. I'd write down decaf, milk, Cheerios, in careful print. And yet somehow, the groceries always returned full of kombucha, frozen smoothie packs, and oat milk I wasn't supposed to touch. Tanya managed the house, which meant she managed the thermostat too, setting it to 72 when they were home and 66 when I was alone. I'd taken to wearing my old knit shawl indoors, the one Walter said made me look like a couch someone would trust. Eli stopped by my room one evening after work, leaned against the doorframe with a sigh like the weight of the house had suddenly settled on his shoulders. "She's just stressed," he said softly, not making eye contact. I didn't speak at first. I just looked down at my hands, papery but steady, and then at him. His hair needed trimming. He used to ask me to fix that when he was little. I'd hold his ear gently and snip around it, careful not to nick. I looked up. "So am I whispered. "But I don't slap people." He swallowed, said nothing, then walked away. The ride to Carmen's office was quiet. I took the bus, as I often did when I needed space to think. The engine hummed beneath my seat, and the air smelled like vinyl and distant perfume. I watched Sacramento drift past, wide streets lined with sycamores, coffee shops with college kids hunched over laptops, and front yards with garden beds just beginning to bloom. Every house I passed reminded me what was mine, what still was. When I walked into the law office, Carmen was already standing, her gray bob tucked neatly behind her ears and reading glasses dangling from a chain at her chest. "Ruth," she said, her voice warm but measured. "Come in. I've pulled everything." I sat in the leather chair across from her desk, clutching my worn purse like a shield. Carmen opened a folder and tapped the top page. "This is the original deed from 2013 when you and Walter transferred title to Eli, but see this?" She pointed to a line near the bottom. "Life estate retained by grantor, with rights of survivorship and control over any sale. That's you." I stared at the paper. I already knew what it said, but hearing her speak it aloud felt like flipping the breaker switch in a dark room. "So, what can I do?" I asked. Her lips pressed into a line. "You can list it, you can sell your share, you can force a partition sale if you really want to. Legally, they can't stop you." I sat back. Air filled my lungs like it had just been approved to return. Carmen leaned forward. "Do you want me to initiate anything yet?" I shook my head. "Not yet, but I want to speak to someone who knows the bones of that house." She smiled knowingly. "Alicia Reed?" I hadn't said her name in years, but it still felt like calling an old friend. Alicia had helped Walter and me buy that house back in '89. She was whip-smart, respectful, and always wore her lipstick like it was armor. "I'll call her this afternoon," I said. "Tell her I'm looking for a quiet evaluation." When I reached Alicia, she answered on the second ring. Her voice hadn't changed, still bright, still grounded. "Ruth Hayward? Now that's a name I haven't heard in a while," she said. "I need someone I can trust," I told her. "And I need it done quietly." She didn't ask questions. "Let's start with a walkthrough, discreet. I'll bring a clipboard. Call it an insurance inspection if anyone asks." I hung up and felt something shift, subtle but irreversible. That night I stood in the hallway by the thermostat, pretending to adjust it as Tanya passed by in her sports bra and yoga pants, holding her phone to her ear. She didn't acknowledge me. She never asked where I'd gone that day. She didn't think she needed to. The next morning, Alicia showed up in a soft gray blazer and flats. She arrived exactly when she said, 10:08 a.m., because she never liked being early enough to draw attention or late enough to raise suspicion. We walked the house together, me narrating in soft tones about plumbing updates, the new water heater, and the aging roof Walter never got to replace. She took notes, glanced at baseboards, measured light. "She's still a good structure," Alicia whispered when Tanya stomped past in heels. "Just needs the right hands." "Don't we all?" I murmured. By the time Alicia left, we had the bones of a private listing agreement outlined. No public posting, strictly by referral. The kind of transaction meant to slide beneath radar until it was ready to land. At dinner that night, no one mentioned my absence. But when I went to bed, I found a text waiting on my phone. No name, just Tanya's usual clipped tone. "Keep your door locked next time." The smell of onion and beef filled the house, rich and nostalgic, the kind of scent that made neighbors lean into their porches and children peek into oven doors. But this house didn't hold children anymore. It held silence and entitlement, and control passed off as routine. I stirred the gravy slowly, my back to the hallway, where Tanya's voice had just sliced through the air like an over-sharpened knife. "I swear, if she moves one more thing in my pantry." No one replied. Not Eli, not the friends she had over for wine and cheese at the breakfast bar I once picked out with Walter. They laughed politely, the way people do when cruelty wears lip gloss and calls itself sarcasm. I didn't say a word. I set the casserole in the oven with the oven mitts I bought before Tanya ever crossed this threshold and walked calmly to my room, my new room, where I had hidden a voice-activated camera inside a hollowed-out Reader's Digest anthology. When I opened the drawer, the red light blinked once in silent understanding. That night, I replayed the audio. Tanya muttering outside my door. Tanya mocking my handwriting on a grocery list. Eli sighing. Always sighing. Never stepping in. I cataloged every insult, every dismissal, time-stamped, archived, labeled in folders like I once did with overdue notices from the children's section at the library, methodically with quiet precision. Meanwhile, Alicia had begun working like a phantom. She scheduled private showings in the off hours, calling them consultations on paper, each visitor vetted and sworn to confidentiality. I pretended I had therapy appointments, haircuts, even Tai Chi. Tanya never questioned them. She was too busy curating her Pinterest boards and playing hostess. On Thursday, Alicia texted me a photo of a couple touring the backyard, a young woman in scrubs and a man in a postal uniform. They looked around the garden bed Walter had built and nodded with something close to reverence. "Good bones," Alicia wrote. The same night, Tanya held a dinner party. I served baked mac and cheese, fresh bread, and sweet tea. Not a single plate of it made it back to my room. "You know," she said loudly over clinking glasses, "we're technically the owners now. We just let Ruth stay because, family." A smirk. "She's lucky." Laughter. Soft. Uncomfortable. I kept washing the dishes, one hand in soapy water, the other steadying the recording pen in my apron pocket. Every receipt I kept was logged. utilities, shared groceries, co-payments on household services, all tied to my account, not theirs. Carmen had already begun drafting the partition sale paperwork. It was sitting on her desk, ready if I said go. But I wasn't ready yet, not until the twist revealed itself. It came on a rainy Sunday afternoon. Tanya was out getting her nails done. Eli was watching something on his phone with the volume too loud. I was cleaning out the coat closet when I found it. A manila envelope tucked into the side of Tanya's tote bag, half unzipped. It wasn't sealed. Inside was a printed PDF, Superior Court of California, petition for temporary guardianship of Ruth Hayward. Underlined, highlighted in pink, were the words, "Due to signs of cognitive instability, financial confusion, and potential self-neglect." My knees didn't buckle. My voice didn't rise. I folded the paper back along its crease and placed it back inside the envelope exactly as I found it. Then I went to my room. I turned on the camera. I sat down in front of it, pulled the knit shawl around my shoulders, and looked dead into the lens. "I am of sound mind," I said. "I pay my bills, cook my meals, and remember the face of the woman who slapped me in the kitchen. Her name is Tanya." I'd hear it before the guests even arrived. Tanya's playlist thudding through the walls like a second heartbeat. Some nights it was pop, other nights deep bass and auto-tune that made the silverware in the drawers rattle. No matter the genre, the purpose was the same, to make sure my silence had nowhere to settle. She called them wind-down Fridays. I called them tactical distractions. At first, I tried earplugs, then headphones, but nothing could quite muffle the shrieks of half-drunk laughter or the sound of someone banging into my doorframe on the way to the guest bathroom. Eventually, I stopped trying to block it out. I started documenting. Every time the decibel level spiked, I marked it. Every party that extended past 10 p.m., every time a bottle broke on the patio or Tanya's voice slurred into something that no longer tried to be polite, I logged it in a notebook beside my lamp. The camera in my room caught more than I expected. Conversations outside my door about me being a liability. Eli sighing while Tanya snorted. "She's lucky we haven't moved her to a home yet." I kept a folder on my computer, labeled it Ambient Evidence. Subfolders by date, each entry more brazen than the last. The neighbors noticed too. I was in the driveway one morning, snipping the rosemary bush down to the root. It had started browning since Tanya's new fertilizer, when the woman next door stepped out. Young, early 30s, sharp bob haircut, baby on her hip. She offered me a tired smile. "Everything okay over there?" she asked, voice just low enough to mean more. I smiled softly. "It's not what it looks like." She didn't press, just nodded. That afternoon, Eli came into the kitchen while I was folding towels at the table. He opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and didn't look at me. "She's just blowing off steam," he said. I didn't ask. He turned. "You could try not making it worse." I folded the last towel with a slow, even crease. "Just stay in your lane, Mom," he added, quieter. "Please." I looked up at him. My son, grown man, spine bent beneath someone else's choices. "I am," I said. "You just don't know where the lane leads." That night, I uploaded the newest clips to Carmen. I didn't need her to reply right away. Just having it off my hard drive, living somewhere safe, was enough. 2 days later, Alicia called. "Ruth," she said, breathless with restrained excitement. "I think I found her." "Her?" "The buyer. We met off-market. Nurse, single mom. She fell in love with the bones of the place. Said it reminded her of her grandmother's house." "What did you tell her?" I asked. "Only the truth," Alicia said. "That it's yours to sell, and discretion is the asking price." Later that week, we met quietly at a cafe 5 miles from the house. I wore a cardigan. Alicia wore sunglasses. It felt like a spy movie, except the stakes were far more personal. The buyer made a conditional offer, private exit, no public listing, escrow held confidentially through Alicia's firm. I asked one question. "If they don't leave?" She didn't hesitate. "Then we escalate." Back at the house that night, I signed the conditional agreement under a dim kitchen light while Tanya sang drunkenly in the backyard to someone else's Spotify account. My hand didn't tremble. I was in the laundry room that morning, folding a pile of Eli's socks and Tanya's leggings, carefully separating the towels by size, when she stormed in like a storm with somewhere to be. "What is this?" she snapped, holding up a half-folded shirt like it was evidence of a crime. I glanced up. "What is what?" This fold. You roll the arms inward. Have you seriously never figured that out?" Her face flushed, full of disbelief over nothing. I held her gaze. "I've been folding clothes since before you were born." "Well, maybe that's the problem," she snapped. "You're a dried-up drain on our life. You take and act like you're doing us a favor." I said nothing. I let the silence wrap around her words like bubble wrap, preserving them for playback. My voice-activated camera had caught every syllable. The timestamp blinked softly from the bookshelf above the washer. Later that afternoon, I uploaded the footage to Carmen with a simple subject line, "Laundry Room Tuesday." That same day, Alicia called me from her car. "She wants to close fast," she said, voice muffled slightly by traffic. "No contingencies, all cash. She's a nurse and just got a shift transfer. She wants in before the end of the month." My hand trembled only slightly as I gripped the phone tighter. "Would that even be possible?" I asked. "If we file a quiet title action?" "Absolutely," Alicia said, "if you're ready to make it formal." I forwarded the offer to Carmen, who reviewed the updated deed within hours. "We don't need their consent," Carmen confirmed, her tone sharper than usual. "We just need documentation of your majority stake, which, Ruth, we have, in abundance." The word we meant something different when she said it. "I'll file the action tomorrow," she continued. "But we'll need an updated appraisal to satisfy the offer." That night, I told Tanya I'd scheduled someone to come by. "Insurance renewal," I said, keeping my tone casual as I poured myself a cup of tea. "Standard procedure. Been a few years." She didn't question it. She barely looked up from her phone. When the appraiser arrived 2 mornings later, he wore khakis and a collared shirt. Looked more like a substitute teacher than someone holding a house's worth of judgment in his hands. I followed him room by room, answering softly when needed, keeping Tanya distracted in the garden by suggesting the irrigation system might be leaking again. He finished in under an hour. Before he left, he shook my hand and said quietly, "It's a good house." Solid bones. They're lucky. I didn't correct him. That night I sat on my bed, scrolling through photo files of the yard, angles the appraiser had captured, sunlight through the elms, the worn brick path Walter had laid with his own hands. It had aged, but not faded. At exactly 6:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. A voicemail. It was Alicia. "Hi, Ruth. Just wanted to say, we're ready. Buyer accepts the cash terms. Friday, 10 a.m. Can we enter?" They planned to leave me in the corner. I planned to remove the whole room. I woke before the sun, long before the front yard caught its first patch of gold. The house was still, Tanya and Eli likely tangled in sleep, unaware their world was already shifting underfoot. I brewed coffee the slow way, using the pour-over kettle Walter insisted made it taste better. I scrambled 2 eggs, cut half an avocado, and plated it with quiet hands. A normal morning, by all appearances. Routine was its own kind of armor. Tanya emerged just after 8:30 a.m., barefoot, hair tied up, scrolling through her phone like she was waiting for someone to hand her the day's agenda. "Could you not burn toast again?" she muttered, brushing past me. "Smells like an old motel in here." I nodded once, offered no reply. The toast wasn't burnt. She poured herself orange juice and disappeared upstairs, still muttering. She didn't ask where I'd be at 10. At 9:52, I carried my laptop, my copy of the deed, and a pen into my room. I closed the door, locked it. Then I set out 2 folding chairs and wiped down the corner of the dresser that would serve as a table. At exactly 10:01, Alicia and the buyer arrived through the side gate. I had left it unlatched. They entered through my window, which I'd discreetly unlatched earlier. No shoes on the carpet. No noise. Alicia's briefcase clicked softly as she opened it, laying out the final paperwork. The buyer, a young woman named Simone with gentle eyes and shoulders shaped by long shifts, sat across from me and smiled once. "Thank you," she said simply. "I didn't ask for what. I already knew." Alicia turned to me with the final page. "All cash. Title transfer by end of day. Possession delayed 14 days for vacate period. Once you sign, it's legally binding." I took the pen. I signed. Just as I capped it, a knock thundered against my door. "Ruth?" Tanya's voice was sharp, impatient. "Are you seriously locking yourself in now?" I stood slowly and walked to the door, pressing my hand against the wood. "Give me a moment." Alicia quickly zipped her briefcase. Simone stepped back toward the window. We moved like a team that had practiced for weeks. The knock returned, harder this time. "Ruth, seriously, I need the printer. Don't be weird." I unlocked the door and stepped out just as Eli came through the front door in his work uniform, tie half loosened and eyes heavy. He paused when he saw me, then looked at Tanya, who stood fuming in the hallway. "What's going on?" "You'll want to sit down," I said calmly, gesturing toward the kitchen table. Tanya scoffed. "This better be—" Alicia stepped out behind me, holding a thick envelope. "Hi, Alicia Reed, licensed real estate broker," she said crisply, handing Eli the closing letter. Eli blinked. "What is this?" "A finalized sale agreement," Alicia said. "Full transfer of title. Ruth retained majority ownership. The sale has been processed." Tanya snatched the envelope and tore it open. "You sold the house?" Her voice pitched, sharp enough to cut bone. "You can't do that." "I can," I said. And I did. Simone stepped into view. She didn't speak, just stood quietly, eyes calm, watching the unravel begin. "Effective today," Alicia added. "You have 14 calendar days to vacate. After that, new ownership takes effect." Tanya's mouth opened, but no sound came. Her hands shook. Eli sat down without a word. Tanya held the closing letter like it might disintegrate. "You sold the house? Behind our backs?" "I followed the law," I said. "Quietly, but not illegally." Eli sat at the kitchen table, eyes darting across the document. The words must have blurred by now. He'd been reading the same paragraph for 5 minutes. "I don't understand. Mom, how could you do this to us?" I placed a small black flash drive in front of him. "That's how," Tanya sneered. "What, your memoirs?" "No," I said calmly. "Recordings. Of your voice. Of what I lived through. Slaps, insults, manipulation. It's all there." Eli looked from the drive to me, frowning. "You recorded her?" "I recorded what I needed to survive." I didn't wait for them to argue. I pulled out the remote, pressed play. Tanya's voice filled the room, crisp and undeniable. "She folds laundry like she's brain dead. We'll get her off the title soon. She's slipping." Then the slap. My startled breath. Tanya again, flat and cold. "You're lucky we let you stay here." When the recording ended, the kitchen was silent except for the hum of the fridge. Eli sank back, stunned. "I didn't know it was this bad." "No," I said. "You didn't want to know." Tanya's arms were crossed so tight her fingers had gone white. "This is all going to backfire on you." I tapped my phone. Carmen's number already dialed. I hit speaker. "Ruth?" Carmen's voice came through, calm and practiced. "They're threatening legal action," I said. "Can you explain their odds?" "Certainly," Carmen replied. "Ruth holds the majority share of the home, legally and verifiably. The sale is binding, and we have documented evidence of psychological and financial mistreatment." Tanya blanched. "If you'd like to challenge it," Carmen continued, "be advised, the guardianship paperwork Tanya drafted has already been added to our file, so has the audio. I'd be happy to take this to discovery. Publicly." Eli turned to Tanya, visibly shaken. "You tried to get her declared mentally unfit?" Tanya snapped. "Don't act like you didn't complain about her too. You said—" "Enough," I said, voice low. "I'm giving you a way out." Tanya turned slowly. A way out? $3,000. Cash. You move out peacefully. No court, no press, no sheriff. Eli looked at me like I'd offered them the moon. You'd really still do that? Yes, I said, because I'm not cruel. Just done. Tanya let out a bitter laugh. You think we're going to take a pity payout after what you pulled? You think that house was yours? I said softly. It never was. Tanya stepped forward, jaw tight. Try us in court. See how that goes. I turned back to the phone. Alicia? I'm here, Alicia replied, clear and clipped. Filing the eviction order with the county clerk now. Tanya opened her mouth, but no words came out. Eli looked down at the flash drive still sitting on the table. This time, he didn't touch it. Every drawer slam felt staged. Every taped-up box echoed like a performance. Tanya stormed through the hallway, tossing towels into bins like she was being evicted from a palace, which, in her mind, she was. The kitchen smelled like lemon cleaner and resentment. Somewhere in the house, something ceramic shattered, intentionally, not by accident. I didn't react. I pressed record. Carmen's voice had been steady on the phone earlier that morning. Let them unravel. Stay silent. Let it record. So I did. I left the voice-activated devices on in the hallway, in the laundry room, in the corner of the living room tucked behind the ficus that Tanya once said clashed with her vibe. Now it was dying, just like their hold on this house. Tanya's voice rose behind the bathroom door. This place is cursed. I hope it caves in. Another crash. A drawer yanked off its track. From the living room I heard Eli try, weakly, Can you just... not? I told you we should have gotten a lawyer, she shouted. We let her rot here and she spit in our faces. You're pathetic, Eli. I walked out to the front porch and sat with my tea. I didn't need to watch it happen. The walls would remember. The recordings would see what I no longer needed to. I was already building a life outside these walls. Earlier that week, I'd gone shopping. Nothing dramatic, just 2 sets of new bedding, a modest bookshelf, and a ceramic pot shaped like a goose that made me smile for no good reason. They were small things, but they were mine. Inside, Tanya kept slamming doors like she expected the drywall to collapse from grief. She muttered something about losing everything and never forgetting this betrayal. Eli trailed behind her like a kite someone had let go of mid-storm. He made half-hearted efforts to stop her, to contain the fury she'd weaponized for years. But he was still tangled in it, and maybe he always would be. I kept a list in my notebook. Slamming of master bedroom door, 9:12 a.m., screaming match, 9:48 a.m., glass shattering, 10:21 a.m., bathroom cabinet ripped from hinge, 11:03 a.m., all documented, all timed. Carmen would get the file tonight. I didn't speak to them. I didn't offer help, not even when Eli walked past me on the porch with a cardboard box labeled "Kitchen Do Not Tip," written in Tanya's unmistakable loopy scrawl. He hesitated, 1 foot on the step. "Mom," he said, eyes tired. "This didn't have to go this way." I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the boy I raised anymore. He was a man who let silence be his answer too many times. "No," I said. "It didn't." He blinked like he wanted to say more, but then just nodded and kept walking. That afternoon, I ran a few errands, dropped off a thank you note at Alicia's office, picked up a secondhand lamp from the thrift store, treated myself to a ginger scone from a bakery I used to pass but never entered. The day felt like borrowed time, and I meant to use every second. When I returned home around 4:30, the driveway was empty. For a brief, foolish moment, I let myself hope they'd left early, that maybe, just maybe, some part of them had accepted defeat with grace. But when I stepped inside, the air told another story. Acrid, bitter, something burned. The living room was eerily quiet, boxes gone, furniture untouched, but on the floor near the fireplace I saw it, a pile of ash, still curling with faint smoke. A zipper glinted near the edge. I knew that zipper. I dropped to my knees, reached toward the charred spine and found what little was left of the cover. Ivory leather, embossed initials faded but unmistakable. My wedding album, burned, I didn't cry. I sat on the living room floor, the ash-stained carpet beneath me, the charred remains of ivory leather curling under my fingertips. The air still smelled of smoke, acrid and cruel, and the silence pressed in like grief. Walter's handwriting on the inside cover was gone. So were the candids from our first road trip, the one where we got lost in Monterey and didn't care. The photo of Eli with cake on his nose from his first birthday was just a smear of soot now. Memories turned to dust. But I didn't cry. Instead, I picked up what was left, placed it gently in a trash bag, and tied the knot like it was any other chore. Then I vacuumed. The next morning, Simone, the buyer, returned with Alicia for a quick walkthrough before final paperwork. She paused when she saw the stain in the carpet and the scorched outline near the fireplace. "What happened?" she asked, brow furrowed. "Someone couldn't leave kindly," I said. Simone looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "I want to offer a larger deposit," she said. "If it means closing early." Alicia blinked. "Are you sure?" "That's a significant bump." "I'm sure," Simone said. "This house deserves to be lived in, not warred over." I didn't argue. Within hours, Carmen had adjusted the contract and scheduled the county sheriff to serve a formal vacate warning, non-negotiable this time. Official notice would be taped to the door. 4 days left, no extensions. That evening, I walked outside and knelt beside the lawn, fingers in the dirt. It was the only part of this property that hadn't been contested, insulted, or touched with malice. Just earth. Still mine, still willing to grow. I planted zinnias. Red, yellow, a soft white. They weren't in bloom yet, but they would be. As I pressed the roots into soil, I felt something shift, not in the house, but in me. A final exhale, like my body had been waiting for permission to start over. Back inside, I made myself a cup of mint tea and sat by the window. I didn't check the front door when Tanya's car returned. I didn't look up when she stomped inside, but I did hear the envelope drop. A heavy thud on the hall table. I waited until she slammed her door shut before rising. The paper was thick, legal filing copy paper, too formal for apologies, too soon for surrender. On the top was the Sacramento County seal, emergency motion to freeze sale of property, alleging mental decline and external manipulation of owner, filed by Tanya Larson, claiming I was being influenced, that I didn't understand what I was signing, that I'd been pressured. She even attached a list of witnesses who'd noted my confusion. The list was just her, Eli, and a neighbor who once saw me trimming hedges in a robe. No evidence. Just noise on court letterhead. I held the paper in my hand for a long time. Then I smiled and walked back to my room to send it to Carmen. The courtroom smelled like stale coffee and dust-covered pride. I sat at the petitioner's table in a navy cardigan Walter always said made me look unshakable. Across from me, Tanya perched rigid in a taupe blazer far too crisp for someone trying to fake vulnerability. Her lawyer, a young man with too much product in his hair and not enough patience, whispered rapid-fire instructions she barely understood. I didn't need anyone to whisper to me. Carmen sat beside me, composed, her tablet open and files stacked like bricks in a fortress. Everything we needed was already in those pages: audio, video, timestamps, receipts, names. We weren't here to argue. We were here to confirm. Case number 22. CV1083-Larson v. Hayward, the clerk called. Motion to freeze property sale on the basis of alleged mental decline. The judge adjusted his glasses and gave me a long, tired look. "Ms. Hayward, are you prepared to speak?" I stood slowly, the way you do when you're not rushing to defend yourself, only to correct the record. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, voice clear. Carmen tapped her screen. "Exhibit A," she announced, connecting to the monitor, the courtroom filled with Tanya's voice. "She's just taking up space. She doesn't even know what day it is. We'll file guardianship once the paperwork's cleaned up." The judge didn't blink. He let the clip play through. My silence, Tanya's slap, Eli's inaction. Then came the receipts. Shared household expenses I'd covered, utility bills in my name, the gift of the house, along with my 51% legally retained share. Carmen moved smoothly through each exhibit. The claim that Ms. Hayward is mentally impaired is contradicted by her consistent, documented financial literacy and daily independent function. Tanya's lawyer stood and cleared his throat. Your Honor, Ms. Larson will testify. The judge waved a hand. Let her. Tanya stood too quickly and nearly knocked over her purse. She's not well, she began. She forgets things. She wears robes to trim the hedges. She didn't even recognize our friends at the last house dinner. Do you have medical documentation to support that? The judge asked. No, Tanya said, then hesitated. But we observed. Who is we? Carmen asked. Tanya faltered. Me and Eli. Carmen flipped a page. Is that the same Eli who is listed here as a co-beneficiary of the original deed transfer and who has not independently filed any petition? The judge raised his eyebrows. Ms. Larson, is it true this motion was filed only under your name? Tanya nodded, eyes narrowing. And are you aware of the implications of perjury in a case involving elder abuse? That was when her voice cracked. She's not the victim here, Tanya spat. She tricked us. You lived in her home for 10 years, Carmen said flatly. Paid no mortgage, contributed no legal ownership, and recorded no formal caregiving duties. Is that correct? Tanya opened her mouth, closed it. The judge exhaled. Ms. Hayward, he said, turning back to me. Anything else you'd like to say? I stood again. I didn't speak to the judge. I turned my head slowly, looked directly at Eli, who hadn't said a word the entire time. His hands were in his lap, his eyes down, still pretending silence was safety. You had every chance to speak, I told him, and you chose not to. He didn't look up. The judge cleared his throat. Motion to freeze sale is denied, he said. Transfer of ownership remains valid. Eviction will proceed. Tanya gasped like someone had slapped her. Carmen didn't even smile. She simply closed the tablet, clicked her pen once, and nodded. As we stood, the bailiff approached with a manila folder. Sheriff's Department has confirmed final lockout, he said. 48 hours. From across the street, inside my parked car, I watched as Tanya dragged the final box down the porch steps, her jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might snap. Eli followed, slower, holding a suitcase in one hand and a crumpled hoodie in the other. No words now, no tantrums, just the hollow sound of cardboard scraping cement and the bitter slap of car doors swinging open. The sheriff stood by the gate, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on despite the clouded sky. He hadn't needed to do much. No handcuffs, no shouting, just procedure. When I'd handed him the court order earlier that morning, he gave it one glance, nodded, and said, I'll handle it clean. And he had. No last-minute appeals, no last-second pleas, only silence, laced with a fury that no longer mattered. Eli looked up once, scanned the street. His eyes met mine for half a second through the windshield. He didn't wave. I didn't flinch. He got in the car beside Tanya, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. The sheriff walked to the front door, tested the knob, and gave Alicia, standing beside the locksmith, a small nod. The locksmith twisted something metallic, made a few brisk clicks, and within seconds, the lock was changed. New key, new start. Alicia turned to me, her hand raised in a quiet beckon. I stepped out of the car and crossed the street. The wind caught the corner of my coat as I walked, cool, crisp, no longer heavy. When I reached the porch, Alicia placed the new keys in my hand. They felt cold, weighted, honest. She didn't say congratulations. She just said, it's done. I stood for a moment, hand on the door frame. Then I stepped inside. The living room was still, the air thinned out, stale from the ghosts of arguments that used to hang there. Furniture impressions still haunted the carpet where the couch used to be. One of Tanya's gold-accented throw pillows remained in the corner, deflated and crooked, like it had lost its reason for being. I didn't touch it. Instead, I opened the back door and let the breeze sweep through the house. The scent of jasmine from my newly planted zinnias floated in, faint but real. I exhaled. Deep and deliberate. Then I turned to Alicia and held out the keys. "Would you?" I asked. She smiled and took them. I didn't need to lock that door anymore. Outside, the sheriff scribbled something onto a form, tore off a pink carbon copy, and handed it to me. Eviction complete. Possession returned to rightful owner. "Thank you," I said, folding the paper neatly and tucking it into my purse. Alicia turned to leave but paused. "What now?" "I get quiet again," I said, "but this time on my terms." I stayed on the porch a moment longer after they left. The street had gone still, the kind of still that doesn't ache, only listens. When I finally went back inside and sat down, my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in years. The message was short. "Marissa." "Grandma? Can we talk?" The bungalow was small, but it breathed. The front door creaked slightly when I opened it for the first time, welcoming, not warning. The hardwood floors had scuffs that told stories instead of hiding them, and the kitchen had a chipped window above the sink where light pooled like it had been waiting just for me. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The sale had gone through quietly. Alicia handled everything like a silk-gloved hand on the wheel. The funds transferred, the keys delivered. I moved in with a suitcase, 2 boxes, and the kind of peace that doesn't come easy after a war. I left behind the bigger furniture, the bitter echoes, and every single piece of Tanya's stemware. I filled this new space with only what I chose. A photo of Walter and me in Yosemite, the one where he's wearing a sun hat too big for his head. A bookshelf with my favorites, Steinbeck, Octavia Butler, Maya Angelou. The ceramic goose planter from the thrift store now sat in the kitchen windowsill, holding a mint plant already reaching toward the sun. I painted the second bedroom sage green. Not because I needed a guest room, but because it made me feel like I was sleeping inside a breath. In the mornings, I made tea and played music on a little radio. No more yelling, no more footsteps waiting to pounce, just Billie Holiday and the smell of lemon balm. And on Wednesdays, I walked to the senior center 4 blocks away and sat in a room with 5 other women, some widowed, some never married, each of us with a notebook in our laps. The group was called Pages Left. We didn't write memoirs. We wrote what hadn't been said when it should have been. We wrote about forgiveness without demand and boundaries without guilt. We read to each other without needing to fix anything. Last week, I read about the first time I learned to change a tire. This week, I wrote about a locked door and how it finally clicked open. One Thursday morning, I found a letter in my mailbox, handwritten, no return address. The script was shaky, but familiar. It read, "You didn't survive. You reclaimed." Joan. I hadn't heard from Joan in 6 years. We used to volunteer at the local library together, back when the world felt simpler. Her words landed like an anchor, not heavy, but grounding. That night, I sat in my reading chair and let the quiet stretch out. There were no footsteps above me, no slamming doors, just the occasional rustle of the trees outside and the distant hum of traffic like a lullaby. When I finally went to bed, I left the door cracked open, not because I was afraid, because I could. The next morning, my phone buzzed just as I was sipping my tea. A simple message. "Marissa, I'm outside." My heart did something strange. It didn't race. It paused, like it was waiting to decide what this meant. I walked to the front window and parted the curtain. She was standing on the porch, hands in her jacket pockets, eyes not tearful, but wide, searching, older than I remembered, but not lost. I opened the door slowly, not out of fear, but out of reverence. There was something sacred in the stillness of that moment. Marissa stood on my porch, hands in the pockets of a corduroy jacket, eyes soft with uncertainty. She didn't speak right away, neither did I. Then she smiled, hesitant. "Hi, Grandma." My throat tightened, not from pain but from the weight of time. "I wasn't sure if you'd open the door," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "After everything." I stepped back. "Come in," if you mean to talk." She entered like someone entering a chapel. Her eyes scanned the room, the bookshelf, the planter, the quilt on the couch. Her gaze stopped at the framed photo of Walter and me on the hallway wall. "It looks like you," she said. "It is me," I replied. "Finally?" I offered tea, but she shook her head. "I brought pie." She opened the paper bag she'd been holding, apple, still warm, wrapped in parchment from the corner bakery that hadn't existed back when we used to sit on swings and share secrets in the backyard. We sat at the table, steam rising between us, the silence not awkward, just tender. "I didn't know," she said quietly, "about Tanya, about all of it. She always made it sound like you were confused, controlling." "She told you what she needed you to believe," I said, slicing the pie. "It was easier than admitting who she really was." Marissa lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry I believed her." I slid her a plate. "I'm not interested in guilt, only truth." She took a bite, chewing slowly. "I kept meaning to visit, but then years went by and it felt too far." "There's no statute of limitations on showing up," I said. "You're here now." She smiled, and for a moment I saw the little girl again, the one who once fell asleep curled in my armchair with peanut butter on her cheek and fairy tales in her hand. We moved to the couch, where she noticed the photo album stacked neatly on the shelf. "Is this all you saved?" "Some things," I said. "Others were taken or burned, but I remember the important parts." She leaned back, pulled her legs up under her. "Can I come again?" I looked at her, really looked. Not to make up for anything, and not out of obligation. "I know," she said. "I want to. Not to fix, just to know you." I nodded once. That was enough. We spent the afternoon in the garden. She held the trowel awkwardly, unfamiliar with dirt under her nails, but eager. I showed her how to loosen the soil, where to plant the roots. We worked in silence for stretches, the kind that felt like music. Together, we planted lavender and sweet alyssum, a border along the edge of the path. I told her how certain flowers kept rabbits away, how marigolds were like little suns. She listened like it mattered. When we finished, she wiped her forehead and sat on the steps beside me. "It's funny," she said, looking at the little row of green, "how something so small can make a place feel whole." "Growth is loudest in quiet places," I said. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Marissa stood and gave me a long hug, not clinging, not apologizing, just present. "I'll come by next week," she said. "Same day?" "If you ask first," I said with a small smile. That night, as I was washing the pie plates, my phone buzzed. Alicia. Her message was simple. "The buyer wants to meet you. Not as a client, as a friend. They tried to lock me in. I turned every door into an exit." The old house sat quiet under a gray Sacramento sky, the porch dappled in the filtered light of early morning. It didn't look angry. It didn't look haunted. It just looked done. A chapter with no more pages. Alicia had called 2 days earlier. "Simone's settling in. She asked if you'd like to stop by before the final key handoff." I said yes without hesitating. Now I stood at the curb in slacks and a soft blue sweater, the same one I wore on the day we first closed. Not as a statement, just as a bookmark. A quiet, full circle. The front door was slightly ajar when I walked up. Not flung open, not closed in defiance, just waiting. Inside, the house felt unfamiliar. Lighter. The floors had been swept. The kitchen counters were clear. The smell of fresh paint and pine cleaner replaced the memory of wine-stained evenings and slammed cabinet doors. And then, I saw her. Simone stood barefoot in the middle of the living room, her toddler on one hip, a measuring tape in the other hand. She looked up and smiled the moment she saw me. "Ruth," she said warmly, "I'm so glad you came." The child in her arms, maybe 2, maybe 3, rested her head on Simone's shoulder but peeked out at me with sleepy curiosity. Simone gestured to the empty wall. "I'm thinking bookshelves here. And maybe a big armchair in the corner, A reading space. I smiled. This room was always meant for books. She walked over, shifting her daughter to her other hip. It already feels peaceful here. Like the house finally exhaled. I looked around at the once familiar walls, the place that had caged me, then freed me, and now belonged to someone who wanted to fill it with storybooks instead of arguments. "You've made it your own already," I said. Simone brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead. "We're lucky, really." I shook my head gently. "Number, you're not lucky. You belong. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Simone's eyes shimmered, but she didn't speak. She just nodded, a quiet gratitude moving between us. I stayed only 10 more minutes, long enough to bless the silence, to walk once more down the hallway where I'd first started to disappear, and then reclaim myself room by room. Before I left, I paused at the threshold. I ran my fingers along the doorframe. Once a barrier, now just wood. Outside, I inhaled the scent of cut grass and new soil. The zinnias I'd planted weeks ago still bloomed at the edge of the lawn, a little scraggly now, but alive. Back home, I placed my house key, my own house key, on the ceramic hook I'd hung by the front door. A small habit, a larger truth. Then I brewed coffee, the kind I liked. 2 scoops, a slow pour, no one tapping their foot behind me. I carried the mug to the table by the window, the steam curling in soft spirals. No music, no ticking clocks, no footsteps waiting to pounce. Just silence, and power in it.